So, hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. Nice to have you with us here. We get together like this at the Arlington Institute about every 2 weeks, fortnightly, and four of us have a lengthy conversation about some of the major issues associated with this transition to a new world. And I'm happy to have my conversation members with us here again today. Penny, Kelly, how are you?
I'm fine. I hope everybody out there is doing well. It's an interesting world.
Yeah, and Kingsley Dennis from the UK. Welcome.
Hello, John. Greetings, Penny, Mark, and to everyone from the UK.
And we've got Mark Gober with us today. Hi, Mark. Nice to have you back.
Thank you. Nice to be here with all of you. I'm dialing in from California today.
Oh, good. Yeah, and sadly, Greg Braden got himself some aftershocks from some dental work or something, and so he's kind of working his way through to get better again. So he isn't with us today, but he'll be back next time. So we do this, as I suggest, every couple of weeks. And our objective is to try to make sense out of the big things, some aspect of the big issues that are related to this transition to a new world. Today, we're going to talk about the transition itself, when it might be and how it might happen. And so I hope you'll stay tuned to the rest of the program. It's going to be an interesting conversation. And so it's been the underlying kind of focus and the objective kind of on the horizon for a lot of us for a long time to saying there's some big thing that's coming down here. You can call it a transition. You can control it, evolutionary jump. You can call it consciousness raising. You can call it whatever, awakening, call it whatever you'd like to, but there is this concept that's kind of in the wind, it's in the air, it's in the water. Yeah, it's all over the place that says all of this exponentially increasing energetic vortex almost that's tearing apart the old reality is the prerequisite to what then will become the transition into a new world, into a new human and other kinds of things, and initiated perhaps, there are plenty of things that suggest that they're initiated by some cosmic event of one sort or another. So the kind of question that we have today is, when might something like this happen? And what do you think, how do you think that it might happen? How might it transpire? What are we talking about here? And there are plenty of scenarios. There's lots of scenarios about different ways in which this, some of them we've talked about here at the Arlington Institute at great length about kind of evolutionary scenarios that are about waves of energy coming out of the center of the galaxy. And, you get this wave that kind of raises everything up, and then another wave, maybe 6 months later, the kind of wave. And so, it's kind of an adaptive kind of process that suddenly, 2 years later, you look around and you say, man, it's all really different than it was 2 years ago. And then there's this more revolutionary kind of issues or possibilities that focus a good part around big events that happen on the sun, some cosmic explosion of one sort or another. Or again, it could be a big cosmic kind of wave of energy coming out of the center of the galaxy that some people have researched and written about in the past. But in any case, the notion is that, it happened in a hurry, and it would rapidly, eliminate or certainly obviate the kind of effectiveness of the present kind of situation and the environment that we live in, and force us into a whole new space. There's kind of a third kind of area that says, the aliens are the wild cards in the middle of all of this stuff. And, maybe they show up in one way or another and influence the whole process. There's another kind of fourth kind of variation that says, well, human beings are kind of connected in an integral way with the whole kind of reality. And if enough of us get our act together and we get a critical mass, then we can affect these larger kind of events and smooth them out, and and so that they're not as disastrous or disruptive as they otherwise might be. So anyway, there's a bunch of different ways to think about all of this thing, and there are increasing voices. Some of them are rather compelling and interesting, that are increasing amounts of detail that haven't been in the past. But there is something, it certainly seems to be, there's something on our horizon, and it's coming this way. It's fundamental and structural in terms of what its effect will be on our species and life on this planet.
One part of me is being aligned with that kind of hypothesis, that there's going to be some really major event that's going to be the turning point with the capital T. But another part of me is saying, well, if that really happened and there was this one major event that would go down in Earth cosmic history, is humanity ready for that? If it's such a humdinger of an event, how much of humanity would have the capacity to respond to that? Are we ready? Or is the universe going to be a bit kinder on humanity and have this more kind of gradual unfolding? Because even now we're in it, and we haven't realized to some degree how much we're in it. So a part of me is leaning to the scenario that actually, because each individual is going to respond differently, and only a certain percentage are going to, let's say, have that full spectrum awakening after some event, maybe that these impacts are going to be in various waves. And so humanity is going to, let's say, be triggered into a higher state of cognition and perception from this transition event at different states, so we can incorporate humanity in a more inclusive way rather than you get it, or out you don't. So that's kind of one thing. And another thing is that a lot of these forces which you talked about, these cosmic energy waves or solar waves, etc., they're coming all the time, and they're changing things all the time, but we're not within that spectrum of perception. So you could say that some events are already being actualized. It just hasn't manifested yet through human, physical, 3D Earth structures.
Talking about a transition, my view has changed over the last few years, because my journey started off with my own transition, going from a materialist, atheist, agnostic, believing that consciousness comes from the brain. There's no consciousness after death. That was my mindset. And then I realized I was incorrect, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. So when I was at that point, let's say 2016, 2017, 2018, thinking about a transition, I said, wow, this is really the big transition, to recontextualize our own identity, that there's something more than just our body. And now I think that's a very big part of it, but there's so much more in terms of transitioning our knowledge of the truth, so to speak. What is the truth of our reality? And it's not just the nature of consciousness. It's what is our true history? Are we alone? To what extent are there other civilizations? The corruption in the political sphere, in the media, all of these things are parts of the transition, I think. And I agree with Kingsley that it seems as though this is a gradual process and we're in the midst of it, but there might be spikes. I mean, just the last few years, how many people have become awakened to various aspects of corruption? Now people are much more attuned to what the media is doing. So I do think it's gradual, though we might in the future have more spikes. And I also wonder about this this notion of whether everyone will transition, and to what degree will each individual transition. It's probably up to the individual how devoted one is going to be to try to uncover the truth and live in accordance with it. But I do feel as though there is a increasing split in society of people looking at reality one way and then other people looking at it in another way. And it might not be possible for everyone to live under the same roof if we have just different realities. So that is one of the big questions I have. How do we, maybe there will be parallel societies to some degree.
If you go back and you look at some of our social history, back in the 60s, we had the whole hippie movement. that really started just a major change. And some of the people that I knew of who were very, very active, active enough to be on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. It became clear as I watched and studied and listened that somebody did not want the kind of change that the hippies were promoting. They didn't want the kind of goodwill. They wanted a fear-based society. And they were very busy trying to instigate that. The people were naive. They're not as naive as they used to be, but they were very naive back then, and they didn't realize how they were being set up to react. And then they reacted, and then, of course, they went to jail. So, so what happened to that whole movement? You know, what happened is all those kids grew up and fell in love and went off to get married and have babies and get jobs in the system working for the man that they had decried not very long ago. So what have we got now? We have this potential. We have, first of all, we have a whole group of old hippies who are the boomers, who are sitting back watching and who are smart enough now to say, no, we're not being hooked. No, we're not being triggered. No, we're not going to be trapped into this, that, or whatever. We're watching. You know, we're going to let you hang yourself with that rope you're putting out there trying to hang us with. So that's one factor that's happening. But the really big difference is that the whole gender thing has really come into play, where we had a whole generation of kids who grew up, fell in love, got married, had kids, et cetera, et cetera. Now we don't have that. We have this massive change in gender identity happening and all kinds of confusion. And so I don't see that same kind of outcome happening that we saw back in the 70s, as the whole change toward a better world kind of petered out, we'll say. It just was like, okay, it had its impact, it made its changes, but what's really happened in the years since then, over the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, is that a lot of people have become a lot more savvy in terms of all of the ways that we are being manipulated. And if you just take the human point of view and leave out the massive hidden changes that are happening in the background, the human thing that's unfolding is probably going to be just what Mark and Kingsley said, one at a time. You know, it's going to happen for each individual. It's going to be something that people adopt or don't. They go along with the new, or they won't, or they can't, or the family splits. And it's not going to be where we all have, like was it Kingsley said, the big incident that we all wake up one day and say, oh, look, we have a new world.
All right. Well, thank you so much to those of you who are our viewers. I want to remind you that we're coming to you from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, our little resort town down in the Appalachian Mountains. We're just 100 miles from Washington and Baltimore, and we hold forth here at the Arlington Institute with a variety of programs, including transition talks, where we've had both Mark and Penny and Greg Braden been speakers at transition talks. Penny will be with us here in April, right? May 13th. It's April already. Yeah, Dave Martin is going to be here in 10 days, and which will be a fun weekend. But Penny will be with us in May, and then Greg will be back with us in August, I believe it is. And so you can find out all about that on transitiontalks.org. or the larger program on arlingtoninstitute.org. And so we hope you'll check into that and take a look at what's going on there. And see the many of the kind of things that we try to generate, all related to this big transition, this big move toward a new world. Take care.
Good.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everybody.